Press the bell icon on YouTube and don't miss another update.
Kashmir, the passage of some very contentious but crucial bills for the BJP, as well as key policy announcements. These have been some of the highlights of the first 100 days of the second term of the Modi government. In Government Matters today, what we are going to look at is the broad points that have dominated the first 100 days, the implications of the decisions taken, and what have been the most controversial aspects. In the studio with me, I have Jyoti Malhotra, a National Affairs editor. Jyoti, without any argument, the biggest highlight of the first 100 days of this Modi government has been its decision on Kashmir. How has that really worked out? How do you think it has worked out? And what have been the big implications on that front?
Ruhi, you're absolutely right. On the 5th of August, I think Home Minister Amit Shah stunned the country by announcing in Parliament that Article 370 was going to be revoked. And not only that, that the state was going to be reorganized into two. So the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir and separately of Ladakh, which is going to come into being on the 31st of October, which is also, we know, the birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Now, the revocation of Article 370 is huge, as we know. There has been a lockdown in the valley, a communications lockdown, several arguments around that in terms of also India's foreign policy, which you know that Prime Minister Modi has been very ambitious about in his first tenure as well as in his second. But most recently, in fact, just a day ago, we've had at the Human Rights Council in Geneva the two statements by India and Pakistan on Kashmir, with both of them contesting what's happening. But I think on the foreign policy front, you may argue that there are human rights violations, and I think those arguments will continue also at the UNGA later this month. But fact is fact. The deed is done.
Right.
India, or Prime Minister Modi, this government, the Modi government, has revoked Article 370.
Right.
And over the years, over the last 70 odd years, we've also seen how this article has been diluted considerably by one Congress government or another.
Right.
The deed has been done by this government. The fig leaf, if you like, has been taken away. Now, the argument whether that was a good thing or not is something that we
Sure.
So that's the first thing I would say, is that the revocation of 370 has been huge. And now on the 31st of October, when the states will be reorganized, I think that will have enormous consequences, enormous repercussions, because you look at cadres.
Right.
You know, you look at is there going to be a J&K? Well, right now it'll be UT, it'll be the UT cadre. But you will have the J&K police reorganized. That will have its own set of, institutional changes.
And there have to be assembly elections in J&K.
There will have to be assembly elections. So I think that's been undoubtedly the biggest, however you want to put it, achievement of the Modi government, or decision or criticism, but undoubtedly.
But this has also had serious implications on India's relations with Pakistan, which were anyway extremely troubled after the Pulwama attacks and the Balakot retaliatory airstrikes. So how do you see that going forward?
So I think the retaliatory airstrikes in Balakot set the parameter of the relationship between India and Pakistan. In the first Modi government, we saw that there was this back and forth, how the Prime Minister tried to make overtures when he went to Lahore. Then everything has been downhill after that, between the Pathankot strikes, the strikes in Uri.
Surgical strikes.
The surgical strikes. I think the Prime Minister has come to the decision that he is not going to have any kind of a relationship with Pakistan, that he wants to put Pakistan into a deep hole, and he is also gathering forces in the international community to put Pakistan there. Right. So whether it's the FATF, which is the Financial Action Task Force, which right now has grey-listed Pakistan, but there is an attempt to blacklist Pakistan. What that means is that that forces the international community to cut off as much aid as possible if Pakistan doesn't stop all the help that it does to terrorism. Right. So that is there. But I think on the Pakistan question, clearly the Modi government has made a decision that it will have very little to do with it. And right now things are so bad after the revocation of Article 370 that Pakistan has also reciprocated that emotion, if you like, by suspending all trade. Right. Apart from Pakistan, with the rest of the neighborhood, Also, I would say that it's the glass is half full and half empty, because in terms of whether it's Nepal, Sri Lanka, the Chinese, I think, have reached out much more.
Right.
On Bangladesh, I think there is some sort of a with the NRC in Assam, there is a definite linkage with that, although the Foreign Minister Jaishankar has told the Bangladeshis that you don't have to worry about it and that no Bangladeshis will be sent back.
Right.
But how do you play that inside the country? So I think that will again be a big challenge for the Modi government.
Right. So Jyoti, as we were talking about, Kashmir has been one big controversial decision of this government. But there have been other contentious decisions as well, particularly with respect to some of the bills that it brought in the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and managed to get them passed. Can we talk a little about that?
So I think what was interesting was that in the Rajya Sabha, the BJP doesn't have a majority. But like we saw in Kashmir, and that also went to vote, that resolution did go to vote, but the Congress was completely outnumbered. Now you can ask yourself why that is, because if the opposition is united and the Congress is the main party, then it should get the rest of the flock together.
Right.
But this disunited opposition you saw in place, whether it was the triple talaq, whether it was the UAPA bill, which is the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which designates a terrorist to be an individual as well, not just an organization. Now, there are huge implications around that, which is that, first of all, does it violate the human rights, the privacy of an individual? And I think that has huge repercussions. Now, similarly, I think with the, say, Kashmir, we talked about habeas corpus. There's been a lot of debate around in our country about how the mainstream leaders which have been detained in Kashmir for one reason or the other, for whether they want that the government feels that if they come out in the streets, there will be much more disturbance. But the fact is that if there is a habeas corpus plea in the Supreme Court, then should they not be produced?
Right.
Now, that is not directly related to the Modi government's 100 days, but I think everything is related to each other in a sense. So when you talk about the policy legislations that this government has done, some of it has been quite amazing. The triple talaq, as you know, which
met with so much opposition in the first tenure of the Modi government, and they couldn't pass it then.
Absolutely, and now it was passed without a whimper. So again, there has been a lot of back and forth on the triple talaq. I personally would say that this is the instant triple talaq, of course, but I think that a lot of Muslim women, and why just Muslim women? I think a lot of women, I mean, I myself and a lot of us have welcomed it. I think a lot of people suspect the motivations of the Modi government, but right now we're not getting into motivations.
I think the issue has been criminalizing the issue instead of given it's a civil offense and not a criminal offense. So
Absolutely.
I think that has been.
So I think that's a big part of this debate about the Modi government. So, for example, on the sanitation front, for example, the Prime Minister has been very forthcoming and very vocal about Clean India, this carryover of Swachh Bharat. So in Modi 2.0, you look at not just population control, although that hasn't manifested itself fully.
Right.
But if you look at this the Nal Se Jal scheme of the government,
which has been a big focus of this government.
Which has been a big focus. You have a full ministry around it now, that the Jal Mantralaya. Sanitation, again, that carries over from his first tenure into the second tenure. Again, there has been a lot of discussion and debate about why Modi is doing it and what his motivations are. Are these pure or not? But I would argue that whether these are pure or not, I think people are benefiting from them. So it's quite an incredible thing for the Prime Minister to stand at the ramparts of the Red Fort and talk about governance issues.
He also talked about banning single-use plastic and not using a plastic like that.
Yes, he has talked about it at this United Nations conference that was held in Noida just a couple of days ago. Although there, Ruhi, he doesn't put out any sort of goals or deadlines. Right now, he talks about should banning single-use plastic. Sure. I think what he did talk about was that degraded land that his government in the second tenure would sort of return about 5 million hectares of degraded land back into, its sort of afforested state. But what is also interesting, I think, Ruhi, here is the Prime Minister likes to take credit for a lot of these things. For example, on the tiger census, you know, it was such a small thing.
Right.
But he loved the fact that there are more than 3,000 tigers in the country today. And of course, he says that this is big in his time, which is since 2014. And he keeps harking back to the Gir lions, which of course are in Gujarat. And I think he likes this. He likes to be, now that he's Prime Minister for the second time, and you know, it's 100 days. But he likes the fact that it's this larger than life kind of persona.
Right. And he also likes this participative form of governance where he asks people to be a part of decisions and of, you know, movements. Jyoti, also two more things I would like to add for our viewers. One, you mentioned this controversial bill. So the RTI amendment bill was also very controversial. And a big policy decision has been announcement of the position of Chief of Defence Staff, which is something which has been a long-standing demand from many quarters.
That hasn't been named yet.
Not named yet, but they've announced that this position will now be created. So to end, because we are really running short of time, the big question mark has been the economy. You know, 100 days may be too little to sort of determine anything, but this is a continuation of the government's economic policy from last time. We've seen how most of the budget has been reversed. Most of this budget has been reversed. What is your take on that?
I think the take is, like a lot of people are saying, which is that the economy is in a serious, deep, dark hole. Even people like us who don't sort of full-time focus on the economy, but if you just look at the figures, they're staggering and they just hit you in the face. 5% growth in the second quarter. It's never been so bad in the last 18 quarters or in the last 6 years.
And the numbers are still being questioned. You're not even sure whether it's 5% or less.
Absolutely. And if you look at just some of the sectors, whether it's the auto sector, where job losses are huge all over the country. Now, the automobile sector is a very good parameter of growth because it employs people. Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, has said that perhaps a lot of young people are not buying cars because they'd rather ride in the metro and in the Uber. Now, whether she's being facetious or not is not the point, but I think millions of people around the country are not being facetious, and they are very and deeply unhappy about that. You talked about the budget being reversed. Now, look at just the two things in that budget. First is the surcharge on the rich. How many rich people are there in this country? There may be, you know, it's great to be rich. I mean, Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese premier, said this 40 years ago, that it's wonderful to be rich, and this is what Manmohan Singh, when he was first finance minister in 91, when the economic reforms were opened up, and in his own tenure of 10 years, when he talked about animal spirits, you remember that, Rohi? So I think what the Modi government should have done was to continue with the animal spirits, sort of taking the economy to new heights, except you had demonetization in 2016, which broke the back of the supply chain in the country. That was followed up by this incredible thing called the GST, the Goods and Supply Tax. Now you have 6, you know, when you go to the market and you have to pay 18% and 28%, and you wonder what's going on. And that has had such a terrible cyclical effect.
The rollout has been problematic of the GST.
I think it's more than the rollout. It's the fact that you have a GST. Look, any country in the world anybody will tell you that any country in the world which has adopted such a one tax for one nation, which the Prime Minister likes to talk about, has had a lot of pain. But in a country like ours with 1.2 billion people, 92% of our economy is not just in the small and medium sector, but it's in the informal sector, which means that there is cash transactions. Everybody doesn't go to a bank account and have a bank account. Now, that's one of the things that Modi government did in its first tenure and now, which is that many more millions of people have bank accounts. But that has had such a catastrophic effect on the economy. And you see that now in today's growth rates where things are down. You know, people are just so despondent about things. So I think first 100 days, I'm not going to give it a score, Ruhi, because no. I think as journalists, we have to just keep reporting the story and...
No, that's fair enough. Well, that was Jyoti Malhotra analysing threadbare the first 100 days of the Modi government and various aspects that have come to define it. Thank you so much for watching Government Matters. Do follow us on YouTube for much more.